Hello, I'm Jane Hutch and welcome to the program where my guest is one of Australia's most successful and acclaimed actors, Hugo Weaving. Despite appearing in international juggernauts including The Matrix, V for Vendetta and Lord of the Rings, his priority is Australian theatre and film.
Is that Dior?
The actor stars in a luxurious gem of an Aussie film, The Dressmaker, which opens nationally October the 29th. Hugo Weaving, it's really great to have you on 1+1. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
You've had an extraordinary opportunity to meet many of the people you really admire, like Sir Anthony Hopkins and Sir Ian McKellen. I wonder, when you meet them, do you still feel the same kind of fear that many of us mortals fear?
I'm always awestruck with people I admire, always. I remember meeting Tony. He's an extraordinary actor with an amazing body of work. But, you know, you meet him, and I met him on set, and suddenly I'm rehearsing with him and doing scenes, and he's such a lovely man. He puts his focus onto you and how are you and what, tell me, you know, he deflects from himself constantly. So, sometimes people can be so disarming, they'll kind of settle down any nerves or excitement you might have about meeting them.
So if they're not disarming and they're a little bit, I suppose, larger than life, do you wait until the ice is broken somehow before you launch into questions you've always wanted to ask them?
I'm not an invasive person in that way. I'll just try and go about doing what I do, and I'm not pushy. I'm not in your face. But most actors I find are actually really approachable. I haven't very often met someone who's like that, who's kind of standoffish or so larger than life that they're an unreal human being. I've met exuberant characters, of course, but no one you can't kind of get to know, really.
This film, The Dressmaker, for me it's kind of a full circle, because the first film I ever saw you in was Proof in 1991, also written and directed by Jocelyn Moorhouse. I wonder, you've both kind of moved back and forth. You've been in Hollywood for a while. You've sort of been back and forth. She stayed there. And now you're here doing this film. You've done this film together. I wonder, do you ever feel nostalgic for those early days of your career in the film industry?
Well, working with Joss has been wonderful, and Proof was the first film that I had read. I'd done a few films before Proof, and a mini-series or two, and quite a lot of theatre. But it was the first film I read that I so wanted to be in. I so wanted to see it. I thought it was it was the sort of film that I'd been watching when I was younger in England. Like, I've been watching art house films for many years, and it was the sort of film that I wanted to be a part of, and yet it was very Australian. And I jumped on it, and I thought, that's my film, I want to be in it. I tested for it. Thank God Joss wanted me to be in it, and I'm ever grateful to Joss. And it was like, I've just had lunch with her, so we can. It's been nice to over the last year or so talk about Proof again and its connection to this film and why I kind of got onto this film, and it's largely because of her. But I don't feel like I've made a massive departure from those days. I've always focused on working in this country, primarily. I have worked overseas, but primarily lived here, never moved to LA. I'm not interested in that. I definitely want to work here, but I'm happy to work overseas, but my focus is here.
This film seems to have all of the themes that you love and are very Shakespearean in a lot of ways. There's love, death, marriage, betrayal, revenge. What were your thoughts when you first saw the script?
Well, all of that. I thought it was a stylistic, an incredibly complex, tonally complex piece. Immediately interested me. I thought Shakespeare can write a scene where a gravedigger is basically a stand-up comedian with a skull, and then the next minute in the play, two men are fighting over the dead body of the woman they love, and that's the ability of Shakespeare, or all the great Jacobean playwrights. And this is probably more like a Jacobean piece because it's got a dark centre to it. It's got a dark underbelly to it, and the theme of revenge, which is so inherent in Jacobean tragedies, is very much a part of this. So, yeah.
I found your character, Sergeant Farrett, very interesting because, unlike a lot of the others, he wasn't vengeful. And you normally like quite deeply flawed characters. So what was the flaw in the sergeant?
Oh, he's got a great flaw. I mean, he's essentially a very nice man. He's a very good man. He's a kind man. I think he understands all the failings and foibles that everyone in Dhangatar has. He probably knows exactly what's going on with everyone, but he doesn't judge too harshly because he's got his own secrets. So he does have a secret, and that secret is that he's a cross-dresser, even though he's a policeman in a country town in the 1950s.
Is that, Dior?
Very good, Sergeant Farrett. My design, but Dior inspired.
He also feels guilty because he's done something to the heroine, Tilly, which is he's kind of destroyed two people's lives, actually, or he's been part of the destruction of Tilly and Molly's life, because Molly was Tilly's mother, and so she's done without her daughter. He's been part of that and feels guilty about that.
But it doesn't feel like it was his fault. He's not kind of evil or nasty like some of the other characters.
No, indeed, there's nothing evil about him, but he does feel guilty, and he does feel like he needs to apologise and atone for that. And he does. He sort of sacrifices himself, and he's both liberated at the end and imprisoned. So he's literally imprisoned, but liberated from. He's come out for a start. He's no longer dressing up in private. He increasingly is sort of being seen in a frock out of his own house, and he goes out with a bang as a matador and gets hoiked off to prison, but kind of takes a bit of revenge on the man who's been blackmailing him. So it's a kind of great trajectory. And there's a complexity of character and of movement within that character, within what's essentially a good person. So it was great.
Let's talk a little bit more about Australian cinema and acting. I read this fantastic comment, an American guy from Colorado, who said, Aussie films are much like the Ford Motor Company. They're either a world beater or mainstream mediocrity. This little offering, and he was talking about Proof, is the Shelby Mustang of 90s movie making. Do you come across many fans who are, really invested in the Australian film industry when they're not from Australia?
I do, actually. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I go to a film festival with an Australian film, be it something like Last Ride, for instance, which hardly anyone here has seen.
It's
great film. Glendon Ivan, brilliant director. He's only done one film. He's a genius. So that film was picked up. Was shown overseas. Didn't get but was picked up by the Museum of Contemporary Art in New York as a great piece of art, which it is, and celebrated in that way. But I constantly take Australian films overseas, and people say, when are we going to see this? When is it going to be released? Or how come we haven't seen this? And it's a very long answer to that question. I won't even start to go there. But yeah, I do meet people who absolutely appreciate Australian films. And also the thing that excites me is increasingly, I just read something in The Guardian by Luke Buckminster about films made between 1995 and today in Australia, and he's saying, well, this is a golden era of filmmaking in this country, and we just don't know that. Some people do, but most people don't. I've been saying that for ages. I think our films are getting better and better. We're just not going to see them. So the problem is not in the filmmakers or the creatives. The problem is in the somehow selling the idea of our own culture to ourselves. We somehow still have a problem with that, or we have an industry which is so slanted towards American films that it's very, very hard for Australian films to get a look in. So both those things are true, particularly the second one, I think. So it's always very difficult to promote your own films in this country, but the quality of them is really very, very good, I think. I always have done.
When you were a student entering NIDA back in the, trying to think, it must be the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, 79, yeah.
What expectations did you have for yourself then?
I never think too far ahead. I just wanted to go there. So I just wanted to do it. I wanted to I wanted to be an actor for whatever reason, but I still don't really think very much in terms of what's good for my career. I don't really think about that. I just try and follow my instincts and read scripts and get involved with projects that in some way intuitively make me feel like this is the right thing to be doing. It's somehow illuminating something either for me or hopefully for other people.
I read that in the Bodyline series back in 1984, that when you played Captain Douglas Jardine, that you read his autobiography and you had discovered that he liked fly fishing. And you got this idea that, you know, this was the secret person that was held in that activity, that passion. I wonder, how important is it for you to find redemptive qualities in characters?
I don't believe in heroes and villains, not really. I never have. I mean, of course, in certain styles of film, you get the hero, and you get the villain. But in life, by and large, people are just people. Everyone's pretty grey, and we all contain heroic and villainous qualities. But we just contain contradictory, complex emotions and feelings and attributes. So Douglas Jardine was absolutely portrayed as the villain of the Bodyline series. He was at the time the villain, the patrician English villain, the pommy bastard of all pommy bastards.
That beautiful, beautiful game that is battle and service and sport and art.
But at the same time, he was more in the writing. It was a more interesting character to play than Bradman in that series. It was the role, I think, because Bradman's such a hero, and you can't say much against Bradman. Whereas Jardine, making him the villain, but at the same time they were humanising him as well. And anyway, I read his autobiography, In Quest of the Ashes, I think it's called. And the last chapter was about fly fishing, and suddenly you read that, and there was something his daughter had written as well. So suddenly he was a father to me, and suddenly also he was a contemplative man who probably quite enjoyed his own company and enjoyed solace and probably enjoyed nature.
You connected with that?
Well, I suddenly thought, well, if he's a fly fisherman, he likes being quiet. He likes the skill of something, he likes the game, he likes the chase, he likes outthinking things. So suddenly that put everything in perspective. So suddenly, well, you can't just be the villain who wants to win at all costs. That's obviously an element in his makeup. And now you look at sport, you think, well, this is the first professionally minded sportsman really on the world stage. He probably wasn't, but he was professionally minded because he wanted to win. Now that then was a sin. Today, if you didn't want to win, you wouldn't be a sports person.
You talked about how knowing that he was a father also changed your perception of him, I guess. Has being a father changed how you perform?
Oh, undoubtedly. Of course, having children completely changes you. It changed my life. So it would bound to change the way I perform because it's changed me as a person. And so every experience you have in life, good or bad, someone dies, someone's born, you fall in love, you fall out of love, whatever it is that happens to you in your life is reflected somehow in your face and in your emotions and in your thoughts. So the complexities of our characters somehow go into our understanding of the complexities of other people. So the more you grow as an actor and the more you grow as a human being, the more you grow as an actor. So there might be some roles, say in a Chekhov play, that are written for 25-year-old man, but Chekhov wrote this as a man who knew he was dying when he wrote the play in his late 30s, but he's writing about a 25-year-old character. As an actor, it's actually easier to play that character when you're older because you've had the life experience that Chekhov had had. So any experience makes you a better actor, I think. as long as you're open to that experience and you're open to the understanding. So having children for Katrina and I was the most wonderful thing that we ever did.
Hugo, you and your family, when you were a child, you moved around a lot. You were born in Nigeria, you lived in, I think, England, in South Africa. Your dad was a seismologist, and one of the fascinating things that I read about you was that when you were in your teens, you chose to go to boarding school, even though the school was in the same place that you lived in.
Yeah, we'd moved around the world a lot. Every 2 years we were changing school, and I was very secure in the love of my family, because the only constant in our lives really was the family. I was very used to travelling and moving, and got to this school, and I started out there as a day boy because I was living not very far away. And the particular school there was where if you wanted to wear long pants, you had to be a prefect, and if you wanted to be a prefect, you had to be a boarder. So I have a feeling part of it was to do with, and also that's the other thing, the classic English tuck shop, which is like where you get your lollies from, was run by the prefects, who were all boarders. So I suspect there was sort of a sense of wanting to wear long pants and be one of the prefects, who basically ran the school as 13, 14-year-olds. Well, they didn't, but they were figures people looked up to. So I think I probably wanted to be a boarder partly for that reason. But also I was aware that I knew my parents loved me. I was very secure in that. And I think I wanted to unconsciously individuate from them in some way. It seemed exciting to me. It was very hard. I don't regret it, but I remember being quite shocked at once I'd started boarding. Why am I doing this? This is horrible. I can't see my family for 3 weeks at a time. But it was actually a great thing for me. I was only there for a couple of years.
So this sense of separating yourself from your family, you also said, and it seems to come out in the way you approach your roles both in theatre and film, that you loved learning and you loved your education, your time in education. Do you think that your career, in a sense, is about continuing in education?
Yeah, pretty much. I read voraciously, and part of my love of reading is often connected to the script I'm working on. So
you read the backstory, you read the biographies.
I'll create a backstory, or if the person's a character from historical character or a real figure who was around, I will absolutely read their story and read as much as I can around that. So that's always part of it. But yeah, so for me, one of the great joys, particularly in theatre, actually, is the amount of pleasurable work that's done to research to give you a better understanding of not just the person but the world in which that person lived. Doesn't mean the production's going to be set then, but it just gives you a sense of where this piece of writing has come from. So if Shakespeare was writing something in 1601, what was happening in England, what was happening in the world, what were the great forces in history which were being expressed maybe unconsciously in that piece, and what does that say to us now? And so understanding that is critical to understanding the play, the character, and why it's still relevant to us today. And I would say that's true of everything I do. I would try and say, why are we doing this? What is this about? What are we saying here? Even if we're aware of it or not, what are we trying to crawl towards, and what are we trying to express? Is
there ever a character that you would refuse to play for a moral reason?
Probably not. Unless I think it's an exploitative attempt to make money out of something which was vile, and perhaps some people have been... And it's not so much the characters that I would be shying away from. I might be shying away from the filmmakers who are trying to exploit something which people were very hurt by. I would reject that on moral grounds, but not the character themselves.
At the other extreme, what if you were offered a part like Mr. Darcy? Would you be Mr. Darcy?
I'm a bit old now. I don't think they'd have me.
Oh, come on.
If I had ever been offered Mr. Darcy, of course. Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Hugo, your parents split up while you were at NIDA, and you've spoken in the past about your regret about that. I wonder, did that colour your idea of marriage at all?
Look, I actually adored my mum and dad, still do. My dad's not with us anymore, but for me they were such a wonderful partnership. And I think I was very shocked by what happened. And my mother was certainly shocked by what happened. And
so you didn't see it coming?
No. Well, eventually, yes, but initially, no. So I always felt very, but I could see it from, always saw them both as human beings. So I never made judgments. Thank God I was old enough not to have to I didn't feel like I had to take sides, and thank God I maintained both their loves and loved both of them still. So in that way it didn't kind of traumatize me. But like anyone whose parents split up when you're whatever age, actually it's not, it's a traumatic thing. But compared to many marriage breakups or many family situations, my life's been absolutely blessed. So I can't say it was a truly horrendous thing that happened. It was a horrible thing that happened, but I dealt with it.
You say that your life is blessed. I mean, you live in an ordinary world. You're not in a glass tower. What, apart from acting, what are the things that concern you that you see in our society at the moment?
Environmental destruction of species around the world, deforestation, overpopulation.
So those issues incense you on a daily basis?
Absolutely, yeah. I remember writing essays at school in the 70s about overpopulation, and I thought it was a big problem then, but it doesn't even seem to be talked about anymore. So there's a major problem we're not sort of really facing up to in the world, and boring as it is, it does mean that we are destroying the world in which we live, and so that's obviously a big issue for all of us, and we've got to be doing something more seriously about it all.
Is that part of the reason that you bought some land to sort of keep a part of natural life?
I bought land because I love nature, I adore nature, and without the natural world, I don't know we have no perspective on ourselves. So to be in nature gives you perspective. To be under a canopy of stars gives you perspective, and to be with trees gives you perspective. I plant lots of trees and enjoy seeing animals on that property hopping around in their own natural state, and I love that. I think that's really special, and I think it's life-affirming, and it gives me a perspective on who I am. I don't have a sort of grand notion of who human beings are, because I don't think they're any more special than a tree or a bird or a kangaroo. I don't.
Because we were speaking earlier about how basically as soon as the publicity gig for this film is over, you're heading off to start filming in Jasper Jones, and you said that it's been a very busy year for you. Is that sort of connecting with nature, how you basically get all that you have to do done? Yeah,
it's always been important to me to have once I finish a project, I have time out to. I'm lucky that we have this beautiful property up in Dungog on the river, and so we get up there. I can be in the natural environment. We can have friends up there. We can grow our own vegetables, and so I feel very, very privileged and lucky to have that place. And I know the film industry has afforded me the opportunity to buy that place, so I totally get that. But also it means I can go there and prepare work for the next project. So I do quite a lot of work up there as well.
How do you judge your own success when you look at the body of your work or you meet people who are fans? How do you think about all that you have done, knowing, as you said, you've been blessed and that you've really spanned many years in a great creative career?
I don't know, it's hard. I have a pretty strong sense of myself as a not particularly special person. I don't mean that in a negative way.
I
just
understand
don't,
that,
yeah,
but we all as humans, you know,
Yeah.
like to look at ourselves,
Yeah.
and I think we all tend to judge our work quite critically.
Yeah.
But when you look at the sort of body of what you've done, do you feel a sense of achievement?
I think what I try and do is to attach myself to something which is offered to me or that I want to do based on an intuitive. I want to see that film, or I love that piece of writing, or I really want to be a part of that, or I really want to work with that person. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to change. And then if I feel like we as a group or I as an individual have worked in the best possible way and have discovered something that's worth discovering and have challenged myself and achieved something, if I feel good about it, then that's really all that sort of matters in a funny way to me. Having said that, if that thing that I've done is then completely ignored for one reason or another, of course it's disappointing. So you do care about what other people think, and I do care about that. But in the end, my own criticism or judgment of what I'm doing is probably the only thing that I take as my guide.
We had Alan Rickman on this program recently, and he spoke about the importance of the audience sitting in the dark and being told a story, and how it was a shame that so many people these days tend to sit at home with their big screen. I wonder, do you think all experiences are equal, or do you side with Alan Rickman?
Yeah, I do like communal experiences. I love the sense of community that you obviously get with the theatre, and Alan Rickman is a wonderful theatre actor, and he's a wonderful screen actor and director too now. So I think he's right. I think we have splintered our lives to such an extent that we don't share things very much anymore. We don't have to watch anything at a particular time. We can watch it whenever we like. We can catch up on it later on tonight or tomorrow or the next day or next week, and we can watch the whole box set of a whole series, you know, and when we're on our holiday or whatever. So it doesn't mean we don't see these things, but actually there's such a plethora of things to see, and I'm just talking about, you know, TV really, let alone all the films and let alone everything else. So I think we tend to, the forums in which we can share things and then talk about them together are no longer with us. So the community, the celebration of our cultures, the celebration of those particular things is much more splintered, and so we don't tend to affirm things together anymore or discuss things together. Those forums are being shut down a lot. It's one of the reasons I do love theatre, actually, is because it's still a live experience and it's still a forum, and I do love going to the cinema.
Hugo, it's been such a great pleasure. Thank you so much for speaking on 1+1.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you.
1+1 is available on iView. You can browse the archive or contact us through the website. Stay in touch and leave comments via Facebook. You can also follow me on Twitter. I look forward to your company next time. From me, goodbye.